Many art forms and even hobbies every single year host competitions which give you the opportunity to test your mettle against others in your community. For Warhammer, it's Golden Demon, and for army painters, it's Armies on Parade, but for Gundam, it's the Gundam Builders World Cup. The Gundam Builders World Cup, or the GBWC, is a global competition held by Bandai themselves, which invites Gundam fans from all over the world to enter their incredible custom-painted, dioramaed and perfectly posed mobile suits for judgment in order to earn a trip to Japan and a chance to win first place in the finals. And if you're all snuggled down, ready to watch this video, thinking it's going to be like one of my other videos where I cover events like Golden Demon and I show you all the winners and talk about how cool their entries are, then you are in for a surprise, because this year, after just 5 months of being into this brand new hobby, I decided that I would enter Gundam's biggest competition with a concept more ambitious than any I've tried to do before, and with just 1 month until the competition closed its entry submissions. So in this video, I'm going to share with you my entire Gundam Builders World Cup journey, from the conception to the creation of my most ambitious project yet. And then at the end, I'm going to reveal how my entry fared when it was judged against the best of the best Gundam builders and hobbyists in the entire world. Let's see. Whoosh. So what exactly is it that I'm getting myself into here? Well, let me quickly summarize, just in case you also want to get into it too for next year. Like I said before, every single year Bandai holds a competition called the Gundam Builders World Cup, which for my Warhammer fans out there is essentially like Golden Demon and Armies on Parade rolled up into one, except it is Gundam. The competition is judged via online entries and are separated initially into 16 individual countries or regions, and these are known as the regionals. First, second, and third place in every region is awarded with a trophy and a pricey or exclusive Gundam kit. But if you win first place in your region, then Bandai will fly you to Japan to take part in the main competition, where you will test your mettle against the best of the best from all over the world for a chance to be crowned the best Gundam builder on Earth. As with many other competitions, Bandai also sets up a bunch of subdivisionals for the GBWC, such as the Rivals Corner subdivision, held specifically for the patrons of their main UK retailer, and of course the under 16 subdivision for unsettlingly talented children. But this year Bandai decided to do something a little bit different and host a subdivisional for their prestigious content creators and influencers. And guys, they noticed me. Bandai reached out to me and they asked me if I'd like to take part in not only the main competition, but also be a part of their content creator subdivisional competition. And of course, I was like, of course, this is the coolest thing ever. Thank you so much. This is so awesome. Thank you. So hello everyone, it's Editing Louise here, and I just got to this part of my video and I end up saying a load of stuff really slowly and it kind of annoyed me, so I'm gonna say it all again but hopefully a little bit quicker. Firstly, neither this video or my last Gundam video was in any way paid content by Bandai, though if you are interested in sponsoring me, Bandai, please hit me up. However, if you do like my content and you want to help support my channel, because I don't do a lot of sponsored content, then please consider joining us on my Patreon. And finally, I got this far into editing the video and I realized I've been calling the competition the Gundam Builders World Cup when it's actually called the Gunpla Builders World Cup, and I'm just stupid, so the whole video I get the competition name wrong and I'm sorry. But anyway, thank you for listening. Back to the video. But yeah, being in the content creator subdivisional, but then also the main competition, kind of feels like I'm now in 2 competitions instead of just 1, with the second one being against people who have already been making Gundam content for probably quite a long time. So I guess wish me double luck for that. It's gonna be hard. Despite that though, I was so stoked to get started, but unfortunately, because I'm me and I'm really disorganized, I didn't see Bandai Bandai's email in my inbox until literally the last minute, which meant I only had about 1 month to get my act together and come up with an idea that was gonna blow everybody's socks off. And then also make that idea happen in real life. That's maybe the most important part. Before I dived into making my own entry, I decided, because it was the first time I'd ever seen this competition, to do the smart thing and look at some of the previous winners to kind of see what the standard was and what other people were entering with. And unsurprisingly, I was immediately extremely intimidated by what I saw. Like, deeply to my bones, I had zero confidence that I could do anything approaching the standard that I saw in this competition. It seems like the Gundam Builder World Cup is just as much about creating these incredible kit-bashed mobile suit masterpieces from the Bandai range of plastic model kits, as much as it is doing some super smooth, techie and impressive looking paint jobs on the suits as well. A lot of the winning entries from previous years, especially the ones which caught my eye, are these huge elaborately made suits which really emphasize the creator's technical ability, creativity and knowledge of the kits themselves. Whilst kit bashing used to be one of the main ways that I enjoyed the Warhammer hobby, I honestly haven't done it in years, and if we're being honest, I do not have the technical ability now or even the knowledge to come close to creating these incredible kit bash mobile suits that the other winners in previous years had done in their entries. So I knew that if I wanted to stand out at all in this competition, I would have to do something different and play to my strengths. And that strength is having the ability to just paint the out of every single thing I see. The first step was to create a cool concept for my entry, so I grabbed my trusty old tablet to try and draw some of my ideas down. The main theme that I wanted to try and pull off was to capture this kind of transition from a hobby desk where you build your Gundam into the in-world world of Gundam itself, where the mobile suit and its surroundings come to life. Because I was a bit strapped for time, my original idea, which I still really like and I think it would have looked really cool if I could pull it off, was to have the mobile suit be on a dark hobby table with the area being lit up by the hobby lamp, revealing the in-world scene. In my mind, this dimly lit theme would kind of be a bit of a cheaty time saver, because it meant I wouldn't have to thoroughly paint every single element on the board, and I could just focus on this one area which was illuminated by the light. But the more I started to sketch it out, the more I started to think, like, wouldn't it be cool if I did paint everything on the board? Like, every single element on the display? I didn't really care about time constraints, I just wanted to be cool. I started the whole concept again from scratch, and I sketched up a new board which had the same theme of in-world transitioning into a hobby desk, but this time with every single element of the hobby desk being fully in the light, with the intention of creating not only a full scenic diorama, but also a fake, real-scale hobby desk with everything on it painted to look exactly like a hobby desk. And of course I plan to make the centerpiece Gundam itself the aerial mobile suit from the Witch from Mercury series, and have her kinda summoning her shield from the hobby side of the board, because I love Ariel and she is my favorite girl. So with my board all sketched out, it was time for me to go to my local hobby store to find everything I would need to make my vision come to life. For the board itself, I found this flat bit of MDF, which was within the 50 by 50 size restriction, and a black picture frame too of the same size, which I thought would act as a nice little plinth sort of deal. And then I spent the rest of my pocket money buying some cool scenic terrain pieces like trees and tufts and moss for the scenic side of my board. Since my intention was to eventually cut up and fully repaint all of the hobby items I would have on the hobby desk side of my board, I really didn't want to spend a lot of money on the things I was buying for that part, because the idea of buying something really expensive and then cutting it up and ruining it just to repaint it makes me really uncomfortable, and I cannot stress enough that I am very cheap and I hate spending money, so I tried to be as cheap as possible here. I found a cheap A4 cutting mat, some old paintbrushes and some ancient useless clippers, along with some appropriate looking paint pots, which I emptied out with the intention of repainting them to look a bit more like the Gundam branded branded paint pots that I kind of struggled to find in the UK, except for this little gachapon version that I got at Comic-Con, and look how cute it is. It's like my favourite thing in the world. Oh my god, I love it. Anyways, with all my prep work done and with time quickly running out, it was time for me to start on the entry itself, starting with the most important part, the Gundam. I thought the smartest thing to do would be to start by painting the Gundam centerpiece itself, because if I ran out of time or if all else failed, I could at the very least enter with a nice looking model. From what I can tell, a lot, but definitely not all of the painting which wins big at the GBWC seems to be this very clean airbrush style, which suits the Gundam aesthetic perfectly. So in order to try and stand out and be a little bit different, I decided that I would hand paint everything with a brush, just like I would with a Warhammer miniature with absolutely zero airbrushing involved. Not that I'm saying in any way that airbrushing is like lazy or cheating or worse than painting with a brush. I'm not saying that at all. I think that's a silly opinion, but anyway. Even though I didn't use an airbrush, I want to give a shout out to the Color Forge Tabletop Tactics Signature Series Spray Primer, because it really helped loads with that initial all-over base coat of off-white. But after I had primed all the parts white, I painted them up in the same way that I know best. I shaded each of the panels with a slightly darker colour, added a couple of recess shades, and then highlighted them all back up with lighter whites and finished off with a crisp edge highlight of pure white. Then I painted all the other blue, red and metallic elements again in the same way I would any other miniature I was painting. In fact, I'd say the whole process is probably most similar to painting something like a tank or another vehicle, especially since I decided to add this very intense weathering and chipping to the mobile suit to really emphasize that she's maybe been in a big battle and was definitely part of the in-world side of the board. Painting a Gundam kit from scratch like this was so fun, and definitely something I would like to make a whole video on, because I've been asked a few times if you can just paint them like Warhammer, and it turns out that the answer is absolutely yes, you can, and it's super easy to. But whilst I do love the way she turned out, and even though this is what I would consider to be a super quick paint job for me, especially on something this large, I did end up spending around 5 days or maybe more just painting her up. So I was super eager to move on to the part I was less comfortable with, and that was making the scenic terrain side of the board. To humble brag, or maybe just like normal brag for a second, whilst I am new to like the Gundam hobby and their World Cup, I'm not exactly new to the idea of making display boards and that kind of thing. For a long time, I absolutely loved entering Games Workshop's Armies on Parade competitions with my own scenic boards for my orcs and my Blood Bowl goblins, and in my time doing so, I've managed to win a couple of gold medals and even silver at Warhammer World, which was a big deal for me. But despite my winnings, I always considered the terrain building part of my boards to be the weakest elements, and I didn't really know what I was doing, and I usually just ended up kind of winging it with whatever I had on hand. So whilst I'd love to sit here and tell you that I watched loads of tutorials on how to build terrain and did loads of research, unfortunately I decided to once again completely wing it, because I'm slightly older now, so maybe I'm smarter and my terrain decision making skills will be better somehow. The first and biggest element I wanted to tackle here was the landscape section, where I'd planned out entire hills, cliffs, waterfalls, and even pools. And in the past, I've made the mistake of using like all clay or heavy clay coated sheets for this kind of thing, and it ends up being a heavy, wet mess and no good at all. So this time I decided to follow my heart and try something I'd never tried before, and that is good old-fashioned expanding foam. I covered the half of the board that I wanted to look like a luscious landscape in the wet sloppy foam in a way which I thought roughly resembled the shape I wanted it to be at the end, and then I left it overnight to harden and expand. And oh boy did it expand. Fortunately for me, as was part of my master plan all along, the hardened foam was extremely easy to cut and carve into once I found a big enough knife to do it. And whilst I didn't exactly expect to be carving giving away so much foam, after a few hours of hacking, I managed to make something which somewhat resembled the shapes I had in my original sketch. Then, to fill in some of the larger bubbly gaps in the foam and to give the whole thing more of a stony, natural looking texture which would be much easier to paint over, I decided to coat the whole thing in a layer of one of my favourite crafting materials, polyfiller. For real, I love polyfiller, it fixes everything. And yeah, once it was dried, I was actually pretty happy with the results and how successfully I had managed to pretend that I do this kind of thing all the time. Yay! I painted up the hills and cliffs in some natural stone colours and mossy greens, just using a dry brush and some glazes until it looked about right, and then I got a bit lost in making this little world and adding in and cutting up the little trees to different heights so that they looked more natural and to scale, and then adding in all the little bushes and plants and even this little flower field in the corner. It was so delightful and fun to do, and actually really relaxing too. But most importantly, I actually really liked how it looked when it was done, and as someone who hates things like basing and stuff like that, I was quite shocked that it turned out this good. I was quite pleased with myself. But with all the fun bits out the way, I had definitely left the most time-consuming and trickiest part of my entry for last, and that was making the fully painted hobby desk replica on the other side of my board. The first and most glaringly obvious challenge that I faced doing this half of my board was how the hell I was gonna cut through some of these extremely tough hobby materials in order to make that very clean cut-off effect. Whilst cutting through a cheap wooden brush and some cotton wool buds was easy peasy, the tough rubber cutting mat and especially the ancient thick steel clippers seemed pretty impossible with just the basic tools I had at my disposal. Fortunately though, my friend Nathan came over to visit, and he's a builder and he has a van full of extremely sharp and dangerous kind of like angle grinder looking saws, and when I told him I was struggling, he kind of took pity on me and he managed to really cleanly cut through the cutting mat and even the steel clippers themselves, so I'm really grateful for that, Nathan. Thank you so much. The other thing that I wanted to do to make the illusion super impressive was to kind of like cut one of the paint pots themselves in half, because I felt like that would be a bit of a flex. But unfortunately, when we tried to do some clean breaks, they just ended up shattering into 1,000 pieces, so I kind of cut my losses there and settled for cutting one of the plastic lids in half instead. Oh well. But with all of my pieces, including the sprue itself from my aerial kit, cut up and mocked up in a pleasingly random yet carefully curated way, it was time to paint everything. And yes, I mean everything. I started out with something that I thought would be really easy, which was the cutting mat, because all I had to do was some basic measuring and get those little squares looking just right. But it turns out that I am really bad at maths and I miscounted all the squares and my hands were wobbly for some reason, so the first attempt went all wrong. But I ended up getting it right on the second attempt and the mat turned out great, and well, it just kind of looked like a cutting mat, which I guess was the point, so yay me. Next up was the paintbrushes, which I had dipped the tip of in some super glue so that the whole thing was super solid and kind of plasticky feeling. And yes, it felt about as weird as it looked to be painting a paintbrush with a paintbrush that looked like the paintbrush that I was painting. After they were done, I moved on to the clippers, which again I had thoroughly glued into position before painting, and these may be one of my favorite parts of the whole board because I painted them so well that I managed to trick myself a few times into believing that they were my actual regular clippers, and I kept trying to pick them up after they were glued down, and that was quite funny. I liked that element. Then there were some easier parts to paint which didn't take long at all, and honestly it just involved a little bit of base coating and dry brushing, like the sprues, the clipped sprue parts, and the cotton wool buds. But as usual, I saved the best for last because what I was actually really excited to paint, maybe more than the Gundam itself, was the tiny little labels for my paint pots. don't judge me. For some reason, I find the act of trying to copy something accurately really, really satisfying and relaxing, so the idea of making these tiny fake labels just kind of did it for me here. Because of that, I made sure to spend at least a couple of hours on both of the paint pots, trying my best to space everything out correctly, copy the Japanese characters accurately, and paint the barcode, safety information, and this tiny little Gundam head profile emblem as well as I could. I did accidentally do a no-no, and I painted a third-party logo on the side here, which is not allowed in the GBWC rules, but I made sure to paint over it before I submitted it, so phew, crisis avoided there. But when they were done, I absolutely loved the way these little paint pots came out, and I think especially with the weathering I did on them, they look like a well-loved and heavily used part of anyone's hobby desk. After I'd spent some time, in fact, quite a lot of time, deciding on the correct angle to pose all of Ariel's shield pieces to complete the illusion that she was summoning parts from the hobby desk into her own world, all that was left was to glue everything down and put the whole thing together, and then with an entire 4 days to spare, I entered my finished board into the Gundam Builders World Cup competition. So all that was left to do now was to sit patiently and wait for the results, and also show you guys my finished entry. Roll the beauty shots. Considering I've never really done anything like this, or at least nothing this ambitious before, and especially due to the fact that I'm pretty new to this whole Gundam thing, I'm actually really pleased with how my entry turned out, and I'm pretty proud of myself for what I managed to achieve here, especially because I was on a pretty tight deadline too. I think if I had more time and another shot at this whole concept, of course I'd have definitely done some things differently, like maybe I'd have spent a bit longer on things like the water effects, the Gundam herself, and making those painted elements look super realistic. But with all that said, I do really like what I've made here, and it's been a while since I've attempted something this big and this ambitious, so I really feel like I did something here. Good job me. But once I'd entered my board into the Gundam Builders World Cup, I started to see everyone else's entries start to pop up online, and oh boy were they good, like really, really good. But either way, in the usual way that arty people tend to do when they see something incredible, I quickly started to lose confidence in my own work, and I kind of resigned myself to being like, I will do better next year, let's just focus on next year. Until just 2 days ago, I got an email. I got second place in the Gundam Builders World Cup Content Creator Subdivisional. And I'm definitely not gonna cry. Again. I've kind of ended up having to rush this video out because I had loads of other videos planned because I didn't think that I would hear back from this competition for months and months and months, but literally heard back from them like 2 days ago that I got second place, so I wanted to get this video out as quickly as possible because I'm so excited, yay! Of course, the winner of first place in the subdivisional went to Spencer with his incredible scenic desert diorama. And this is like the easiest and most correct decision ever made because it's actually so stunning. So a massive congratulations to Spencer on his big win. And in third place was Chloe with her absolutely adorable little Christmas SD Gundam diorama, which is just so cute, and I'm so happy that it placed. So a huge congratulations to her too. Although it's safe to say that I am officially out of the running for that ultimate big prize of a trip to Japan paid for by Bandai, I do win a perfect grade Gundam kit, which is like the fanciest, highest grade that there is, and also a personalized engraved trophy, which won't have arrived probably by the time I edit and make this video, so pretend this is me and my trophy. Thank you. I'd like to thank everyone who Photoshop believed in me. works. But I guess what this whole video proves is that it doesn't really matter how new you are to any hobby at all. If you like it and you share your genuine enthusiasm with others, and you work hard to actively take part in that hobby, and you push yourself to improve your skills, then you may find yourself being rewarded for something you just love doing in really unexpected ways. But with that, I'm afraid that is all we have time for today. As usual, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for being rogues. I'll see you in the next one. Bye. Bye bye.